All right. Hey, it's another episode, I'm back. And I've talked about a bunch of different genres and a couple of different eras of films recently. And yet I wanted to get back to this franchise, the Purge franchise. Have you ever seen that? What do you think about that? Is it a horror movie franchise? Is it a thriller franchise? Is it something maybe it's more relevant to what I've been on lately? Is it a dystopian future science fiction franchise? Maybe, huh? It's something that I remember watching the first film back in 2013, and it didn't really occur to me that that's what this was. I didn't connect those dots. I really thought, well, this is, of course, a horror movie, and it's about the family who's trapped in their house, and you've got the home invasion tropes in play of, who's going to get to them first and who's going to go first, that kind of thing. There's a whole run of those films, that specific genre of horror films that are, every once in a while you'll get like a rash of those that come up of the group of people, the group of friends, the family, the couple. They're trapped in a house, in a building, whatever, and the bad guys are trying to get into them, whether it's like actual just psychopaths or monsters or aliens or whatever. It's like, it's a thing. It is a thing that stories kind of revolve around that, right? And I didn't really remember this element to The Purge when I first saw it over 10 years ago now. But watching it again now, I realized, this isn't just about this one family and these psychos that are outside trying to get in. This is about way more. It's much, much bigger picture. Because part of the story of the first film, this is the one with Ethan Hawke, with Lena Headey, and with their two kids. And they are the well-to-do, I guess, upper middle class or upper class family that they make their living by selling these home security systems to keep people out during this purge night. And the story in the first film is that they lock down the house, but their daughter lets her goofball boyfriend in the house, thinking he's going to do something, talk to dad and, change some things about the family. And that all goes wrong. And as that is happening, the son also lets in a stranger who is looking for help, looking to get off the streets because people are chasing him. And that sets a whole nother thing in motion of these people that were chasing the guy wanting to get into the house. And because during the purge, all crime is legal, they're going to do whatever they have to do to get to their guy, including get into this house and take out this whole family. And so that is kind of the surface level premise of the film. But the underlying thing there, the subtext that I just got to be honest, I didn't pick up on it when I originally saw it, is that it's more about the stranger, the guy who comes in off the street, and the situation, the circumstance that he's in, that he has to hide and run for his life because the people who are chasing him value his life so little that it's nothing for them to just torment him and essentially throw him away. And that's like the B plot of the movie, but it is the bigger picture, because when you get into the later films, that is exactly what these films are about. I'm sure that was the entire backstory and the intention for all of these films. I mean, that's something that if you only ever saw the first film and maybe you felt however you didn't like it or you did like it, but if you didn't keep up with the franchise, I think it could be easy to just assume, these are just the same thing over and over and over. It's a series of films. They're all called The Purge in some ways, so it's probably all just the same thing again and again and again. And yet, This first film, and this is from writer and director James DeMonico, who I don't know any other work outside of these films, but knowing how this can kind of happen sometimes, of coming up with a story or trying to get a project put together or a film off the ground, the film you end up making is what it is, but the time, the effort, the energy you put into making that film, you've probably got more ideas in store. There's a lot more that if I had more time, if I had more money, if I had more films, I would tell the rest of the story. I could see that being the case with this. I don't know if it is the case, but I feel like when this first film came out, there was enough baked into it of, oh, there's a lot more going on outside of this one family in this world of the Purge. And I think that's what we end up getting in the later films. And so if you never saw the films, like I hadn't, I just assumed, all right, there's 4 more films in this series. They're all the same thing. They all kind of do the same thing. They don't. They really don't. The second film, The Purge, Anarchy, is one of those that I really, from the beginning, I thought, wait, this is nothing like the first film. This is a whole different approach to not the structure of the first film, but the universe of the first film. It is about this world in which, the United States government has decided it's okay. One night during the year, was it April 21st, I think, that for 12 hours, you can do anything you want, consequence free. No questions asked. To think that through, right? To not just say, oh, that's the context for our little family home invasion thriller, but to instead say, no, that is the world that this story is set in. And now think through all of the other ramifications of that kind of a world. Now we're talking. Now we're on to something. Because that's what the rest of these films do, actually. They take it from a kind of ground level, the perspective of a character or a group of characters. But they're all coming at different approaches to this sort of vision of society where life is so devalued and money and power and the reach of the government is so, I don't want to say celebrated, but it's held in such high regard that life doesn't matter. Human life, humanity is almost pointless, And the second film, we have a very interesting kind of approach to this because it's not about a family trapped in a house. It's about a group of different characters doing their own thing, living their own lives in their own circumstances. And they are kind of driven together on the night of the purge because they are all kind of caught, they're caught in the middle of it. And they're not meant to be out doing things on the purge night. They're meant to be safe and secure, except for one. And so it's their race, their struggle to find safety, to find a safe place. And I think, for all the strengths of the premise, the first film, as much as I like Ethan Hawke as an actor and as just and even as a celebrity, really, if you look at some of his interviews, some of his talks and his panels on filmmaking and acting and storytelling, he's one of the more eloquent and passionate and thoughtful champions of that. There's so many moments that I've seen of him on a stage or at a microphone saying some really insightful and really pointed things about the state of the industry, the state of the craft, and just the ways that the industry and the artistry has changed over the years. So all that to say, I really like Ethan Hawke as an actor. I like his choices, and he takes big swings. He goes out on a limb to do things. And in the first film, I feel like, this must have been something that connected in some way. But his character in the first film is not a good character, not a good guy, put it that way. He's really kind of despicable when you break it down. Yeah, he's the father. He's trying to protect his family, but protect his family from a machine that he kind of helped create in a way, you know? So it's kind of hard to feel like, I don't know if I really like this guy or I want this guy to succeed. Now in the Purge Anarchy, we get a new lead character, more or less, in Frank Grillo, and his character of, was it Barnes? I think that's his name, where he is the one that when we first meet him, it looks like he's going out to purge. He's going out to raise some sand. You know what I'm saying? We find out as he runs into the other 4 or 5 characters throughout the night, he's not going to just kill everybody and do all kinds of bad things. He's there. He's out that night to get revenge. And it's such a deep personal story to that character. And Frank Grillo, always solid. And I feel like he brings a real heaviness and a real heart to the film in a way that I think you shouldn't expect from a quote unquote just horror film. But that's what I'm saying. Like, this isn't just a horror film. This is actually a really pretty deeply pointed commentary on society and the media and the government and all of that stuff. And for me, it works. I really like this character. I like this new approach to telling a story in this world. And so when this film is over, you think, well, okay, these characters might have made it through the night or kind of gotten around the purge, the danger of the purge, but the purge still exists. Like, they didn't actually change anything about the world that these stories are set in, you know? And so when we get to the Purge election year, which is the third movie, that's where I think it takes that aspect head on of not only are these characters maybe caught in some bad situations, this is a night where everything is dangerous, everybody is fair game, but now we're looking at a presidential candidate in, was it Elizabeth Mitchell, and her attempt to just make it through the night because she's got a big bullseye on her back. And Frank Grillo, the same character, Leo Barnes, he comes back in a new capacity. He's not like this same character, same name, but now he's a Secret Service agent working to protect this presidential candidate. There's a little bit of a disconnect. Like, I'm not quite sure how we got from the character he was in Anarchy to the character he is in election night, or election year, I'm sorry. But nevertheless, that's where we end up. And so we see now not only the side of the guy who struggled with getting revenge and the trauma of his loss, but now we're seeing a guy who is taking charge, taking command of the situation. And that's where, honestly, that's where Frank Grillo really delivers. That's his bread and butter, is like, I'm a guy who knows what I'm doing, and you're not going to mess with me. And this, I think, this allows this whole franchise to really broaden out, like zoom out more, and give us an idea of not just a family in a house, not just a group of strangers in one city, but to see the whole picture of like this entire nation falling under this purge type of mentality. And what does that do? You know, but that's what I'm saying. It's like this whole thing is an exercise in like thinking this whole thing out. If this is the world that we're living in, if we play this out long enough, on a long enough timeline, where do we end up? You know? And what are the deviations, the perversions of this rule that end up being allowed and end up taking place? You know, even in this film, there's a moment towards, the third act where these characters basically end up like in a prize auction dinner where all of these high society, wealthy guests that are in attendance, well, they're too good to get their hands dirty by just going out into the streets and killing random people. They're going to make a show out of select targets that will be executed on stage, or maybe they can even, if they choose, they can go up on stage and partake. And it's like, you could see that happening. There are weird things that will happen when you just abandon all rules, right? And so that's where I think this film becomes way more than just a horror film or a horror franchise. It is saying a lot. It's, in some ways, I guess, maybe a sort of a version of satire, let's say, but it is a very sharp and pointed commentary on society and where people are willing to forget the rules and willing to go against their own principles when you say, oh, who cares? There are no rules tonight. And so here, I think it's strange because I really assumed, oh, well, every film that comes out in this franchise, they're just kind of probably getting worse and worse. You know, I talked about that in another franchise that I just did an episode on. And, you know, it seems to just kind of be the typical pattern is you have a series of films or stories that run long enough, they generally kind of get worse and worse and worse. And every once in a while, something will break that mold. And I think here we actually have a series of films that also break that mold. They really do. It's not that they necessarily get better. The quality is what it is. But I think the thing that improves with each of these films is the context, is the world building, basically. Even though the world looks almost exactly like the world we live in, you start to see like the intricacies of it and the ways that it operates ever so slightly differently from our real world. And so from Purge election year, we go to the First Purge. And I remember seeing a part of this film, probably when it came out on, I don't know, streaming or home video or whatever. I remember seeing maybe a third of this film, and I just thought, wait, what is this? I don't know what this is. This doesn't even seem like that scary. But that's because I was still on that thing of like, oh, this is a horror film franchise. And this film is actually, it's kind of boring. But now, having seen the films in the right order, in the right context, I can see now, like, this isn't just a horror film franchise. This is a film that is talking about society, where civilization goes off the rails. And this one, I guess, is the way to flesh that out a little more, because it's stuff that we've maybe heard about or is implied in the first three films. Here we get to see it actually come to fruition when the very first Purge social experiment is put into place in, where is it, like New Jersey or New York or somewhere like that, in some minority community that it's pretty quickly implied. It's like, we really don't care if these people live or die. And we're actually willing to stoke the fire a little bit and get some activity going. Which, look, that is, I think, what this franchise is underneath everything. That is what it's all about, is the powers that be playing with us, you know? I think that's what this ultimately gets at. And so this film, you know, for as much as I didn't really, I didn't feel impressed, and I didn't really even understand it when I saw it or saw part of it all these years ago, watching it again now, I actually really liked it. I could maybe do with a little less of the cartoonish character that we see come in and out of the film. I can't think of what his name was, but there was one character that shows up, and he's kind of like, I think his name was like Skeletor or something. He just looked like some crazy crackhead who was out just doing whatever, killing everybody and having a night of it. Because I think the idea in the first one, at least, was that, oh, if you participate in the Purge, we'll pay you a certain amount of money for your participation or for each kill or something like that. So this guy is like, I need my fix. I'm doing everything. I need all that money. And so at some point it kind of gets into cartoonish territory, but was it Marissa Tomei plays like I think she's like a psychologist or some kind of sociologist or whatever that comes up with this whole experiment and how it should work and what the supposed benefit of it would be and all that. And then you see as it kind of gets taken out of her hands, it's like, no, this is a way for us to sort of backdoor suppress or oppress a community or an entire class of people. And then it's like, oh, okay, we're on to really big stakes now. So with that in mind, it's like this film looks and feels very different than the first film. And so to me, I'm sure that was part of it. Like, I don't get what's happening here. Like, this doesn't seem at all like what I thought this franchise was, because the first film is a family in a very nice, elaborate, high-value community, and they've got all this technology and this security, and it's all white folks except for the one guy who is the one that's being chased, right? In this film, by the time we get to the First Purge, we're taking it back to the roots in the sense of, no, this started as a way for government, or you could say a certain leaning type of community, to really put the fix on this lower class minority community. And so that's where we see it. That's where we see the struggle play out, is these people who, one, don't want this put upon them, and two, they're having to do whatever they can to survive it. And then three, also like realizing like, oh, this is the government. This is the powers that be playing with us. You know what I mean? There's like multiple layers to it, which I really didn't anticipate that. When you watch it with that lens though, I think that's what makes this franchise actually pretty powerful. And so look, by the time we get to the Forever Purge, which is in 2021, you know, I kind of felt like, well, I thought we'd really explored everything we could in this world. And yet, turns out there is, of course, much more, because all of these stories, all of this whole premise has been contained to the United States. This is a federal night. This is a federal law or whatever, that this one night during the year, this is allowed. And everybody, you know, does what they do. In the Forever Purge, that's where we basically see the whole damn train run off the rails, because not only is it that, oh, people decide we don't got to stop tonight, we'll just keep this thing going, but also we get the sense that, oh, now this is spreading across the world, especially to the south, into Mexico, and you know the dynamic has changed. When you have a culture or a country, an entire nation that is like, we will allow murder, of course, consequence-free. And when that spills over a border, what happens then? So that's where I think this film really opens up the canvas all the way. Now we really have a sense that this is not a thing that benefits society. I mean, clearly it's not, because that's why we don't have it in reality. But even in the sense of, in the world of these films, there's a good portion of the characters and of the idea is that not everybody's on board with this. When the tides turn, in the sense that maybe not everybody's on board with this, but enough people are on board with it and partaking that, one, it kind of goes past its bounds. It goes past the 12-hour window. And so then it's like, well, now we have true lawlessness now. But then also it goes beyond its borders. And now this is the thing that becomes like a worldwide crisis. And so that's where, honestly, this is the film that probably should have been called The Purge Anarchy, because this is the one where it's like, no, there are no more rules anymore. And then it's like, where do you go? How do you survive this now? I mean, it's basically the Wild West out here. I think that's even, Like the poster, the cover art for this one is like the guy on the horse with the cowboy hat. It's like, yeah, there is nowhere to go. We're back in the frontiers now. It's like, you make up your own rules. And it's a scary thought, the idea that the world that we know, everything that we lived with for centuries now, everything that we've built modern society upon can come crumbling down when you take away just a few hours of one day out of the year. When you say, for 12 hours, anything goes. Yeah, again, it's like you run that out on long enough timeline and the whole world comes falling apart. And so, look, maybe this is a thing that I kind of foresaw or was sort of predicted the culture divide and the political divide and the even moral divide in the country that we're seeing today, because, the first film came out in 2013, over 10 years ago. I mean, the world wasn't what it is today. Yeah, there were, differences in opinion, differences in beliefs and political ideology and all that stuff. That's always been there. But, to kind of retrace the last few presidential elections, the shifts in political movements and cultural movements, and then, of course, you throw in there like COVID and, the fools that like even don't even believe that was real and all that, it's like there's a lot of things out there that are so easy for people to just say, to hell with it all, What do the rules even matter? And so this is a film franchise and a series of stories that I think are actually pretty smartly entertaining that or exploring that idea. And it's guised under, this horror film franchise sort of umbrella. I gotta say, man, I really I slept on all of these films. The first one I saw, but even then, I didn't really see it for what it was, And I think if you look at it that way, if you look at these films as more than just, just cookie cutter horror films, if you really look at what they're trying to say and what they're trying to comment on and even poke fun at in some moments, you could see like, oh, there is some real thought and some real energy and spark and some bite behind what's going on in these films. So, I got to say, I'm impressed. I just like that these films are saying a lot, and yet so much of it kind of flies under the radar. So you could just enjoy it. Although I don't know how much you would really enjoy these films if you weren't seeing that level, if you weren't looking at those depths of the story. I don't know if these are entirely that entertaining, But if you're watching them and really trying to grasp and sit with the pretty scary ideas in them, then I think they are actually pretty thought-provoking. And yeah, they're pretty disturbing to think like this isn't that far removed from the world we actually live in. I mean, you could, not to get into too deep of like political or social soapbox here, but it's like, yeah, hey, what is a country, what is a community, a civilization, a society that says, we have a problem with people walking around with guns shooting each other and shooting at groups of each other. And that's not a good thing. That's never a thing that should be happening. But you know what? Even though we don't agree with it, we don't like it, is there really anything we can do about it? We just let that ride, I guess, right? Where are the real consequences for that? Where's the real movement in society from actions like that. And I think, the Purge, the film, the franchise, it's playing it out to the extreme. It's like, well, what if we just said you could do whatever you want and no consequences and be as imaginative as you want? Who cares? And in the return, everything will be great for the other 364 and a half days of the year. And so you put that up against our real world where it's like you could go all 365 days of the year and never have a problem, never have a worry. Just go about your life, do your job, deal with your family, your friends, your day-to-day life. But it could turn out one of those days you get shot up in a mall or you get run over at a parade. It is what it is. We'll allow it. How will we allow it? Well, we'll let it happen again. We won't do anything about it. You know what I mean? Like, I think to me, that's my read on it. That's the parallel. It's like, we aren't too far from just basically state-sanctioned murder and crime. What's the difference between explicitly allowing it and just basically negligence, Anyway, I already went too far. I went too far. I stopped talking about movies now. Anyway, The Purge, the film franchise. I haven't seen the TV show, but this film franchise actually has impressed me and kind of surprised me at the depths and the things that it's actually trying to say, the themes of it, more than I really expected. So for me, it's actually a pretty substantial entry into this. I guess you could still call it a horror film series, but I feel like it's outside of that. I feel like it's beyond that. But I don't really know what else to call it. Because even then it's like, well, what would the next film, if there were to be a next film, a sixth film, what could that even possibly be? Because I think we're kind of basically on the verge of the apocalypse by the end of the fifth film. So the next film is basically post-apocalypse. We're basically at Mad Max now, So I don't know where else you could go, but I said that after the third film. So anyway, that's it for me for this week, for this episode. I wanted to really dig into this franchise. I feel like I slept on it, so it's interesting to look back in a way. And, if this is something, maybe I got a whole different read on it than most people or audiences of the time when these films came out. But maybe it's worth looking at them now if you hadn't seen them or you only saw them when they first came out. Because I feel like maybe they predicted some things about the world and the state of the world, but now, all these years later, I feel like, oh, man, kind of accurate in some weird ways. So anyway, that's it for me. I'm out of here. I'm going to go get in some shade because it's a little hot. I got the sun coming through the window. So go, stay cool, and enjoy yourself. Go watch something new.